Greetings, everybody. This is Christopher Messina coming at you from the Messy Time Studios, broadcasting as ever from the beautiful beaches of the last free state in America, Florida. Joining me from slightly up north in the Carolinas is Spencer Cocanour, who has been gracious enough to join us. He has a 24-and-a-half-year career in the Air Force, Special Operations, Combat Controller. We can dive into his career in more detail. Very impressive. We're going to talk about cat rescuing, among other things, and we're going to touch on the fun events in Tehran. So, Spence, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Yeah, Chris, I appreciate the invite. So, looking forward to our chat.
Awesome. Well, not much happening in the world on March 2nd, 2026, except for the fact that, at least in my view, we are rectifying an error we made 47 years ago. I'm not just speaking about the whole presidency of Jimmy Carter. I'm speaking about the Iranians and we Israelis and Americans finally kind of removing this pox from humanity. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I got mixed feelings on the whole thing. I mean, again, as you said, this is a long time coming. And, I think this is one of those conversations of, if not now, when, is a good way to kind of put it, because there's no question, and I don't think anybody's mind, that Iran would decide, no, peace is a better way. I don't see that happening. Pretty much it's kind of hard to back off of, hey, we want to completely eliminate the state of Israel. And that's our first objective. And then if we could get away with it, we'd probably do the same in the United States. You could kind of look back to, what started the whole Iranian Revolution back in the late 1970s. And, I don't know if U.S. history was the U.S. was on the right side of the whole Shah type conversation and what have you. I think that was a lot of our issues right off the bat. But, there's no question that it's been a terrible regime, hard on their people, and absolutely trying to undermine everything in the Middle East that we've tried to support. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, you make a good point. And one of the questions I think a lot of us wrestle back and forth with is the idea that we shouldn't George Washington, no entangling alliances, right? Let's not get involved in what other people are doing. At the time, he was talking about Europe, where all they did was petty principalities and dukedoms fighting each other constantly. We shouldn't be drawn into that. It's a hard question, though. Especially in regards to the Shah and Ibn Saud and Saudi Arabia and all the rest of it. Desert dwellers who suddenly had lavish wealth bestowed upon them by mainly English and American oil companies, right? Who went out into the desert, and the Persians worshipped Zoroaster and worshipped the oil that burned off the ground as part of religious rituals years ago, right? So we turned that into a vast amount of wealth. Should Americans get involved in telling other people how to run their countries? It's a hard one. It's a real hard one. We kind of deal with the Shah, but then we potentially betrayed him, and was all that worth it? And the mullah, Ayatollah came back from Paris out of exile. He lured a lot of Iranian expats home, many from America, many from Europe, and he summarily executed all of them once he had control. So tricky.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, his taking over, basically exploiting all the, the Khomeini exploiting all the issues that the Shah basically fertilized with his own people. There's no question about that. He was exploiting that, and once he was in power, he eliminated anybody that would be a threat to his regime. So, and let's fast forward now to where we are, and let's face it, Iran has been picking away at us for decades. The number of times, the explosively formed penetrators in Iraq, those are absolutely, we had supply chains figured out that those went absolutely back to Iran.
No question.
And the number of U.S. casualties associated with that was, significant. There's no question about it. And there's a direct tie to Iran. Now, on the flip side, we were doing the same thing in Afghanistan with the Russians, supplying the Stinger missiles to the Mujahideen and all that other kind of stuff. So, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. But, we weren't necessarily holding their feet to the carpet or the fire either, aside from, we're going to do sanctions, that's pretty much sanctions is really the only tool that we've used, in the whole dime thing for decades. And let's face I mean, okay, the regime is, inflation's out of control, the population is starting to protest and what have you. But for a minute, do you think of that the economic warfare that we've been
No.
waging for decades was going to be successful? I mean, I think that's naive.
No, it only created opportunities. I mean, familiar with Glencore, the big commodity trading firm in Switzerland. That began because Mark Rich, an American oil trader, decided to dodge sanctions and trade oil with Iran sitting from his trading desk in New York. Just before the police were about to swoop in and nab him, he screwed off to Switzerland and made himself a billionaire. Nothing changed. And ironically enough, he was convicted in absentia of federal felonies, but his ex-wife years later convinced Bill Clinton to give him a pardon as one of his last things on the way out of office. So Rich made out just fine. There's no impacts to him, and the Iranians got straight oil anyway. Yeah, I find, especially having done a bunch of public-private sector work in national security from the private sector side, often the naivete of politicians in relation to economic realities is sweeping. Right?
Yeah.
They think, I'm going to pass some law and I'm going to sanction someone. For every person says, I guess I can't deal with them because my bank won't give me a line of credit. 40 opportunistic people popped up saying, I know how to make money doing that.
Yeah.
Doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it's like you squish on a balloon and you got this part kind of pushed down, but it just bulges out somewhere else.
Pops out somewhere else. Exactly.
But I mean, I'd say that, I mean, as far as the best time to do it, I mean, we're probably close to one of the best times to do it. I mean, Syria is relatively trending positively. I mean, Syria now is, in tight with the royal family, which probably has controls, as in from Saudi Arabia, which probably has controls on that. So their proxy force that they had in Syria has been disrupted, as far as the Quad force at Iran has been basically propagating all across the Middle East. So again, like, should we have done it? Man, I don't know. I mean, I guess time will tell whether or not this was a good idea. If you're going to do it, is there a better time to do it? Yeah, I
probably
can't really say.
No, it's they made it personal when they kept trying to blow up my friends all over the world. And they made it personal when they shot missiles at my daughter in Haifa last summer. So I thought, there's been, what I find amazing is kind of it's not in direct parallel at all, but Milton Friedman, the American economist, said it beautifully about our government. How is it possible that so many intelligent, well-intentioned people go to Washington and we end up with the mess we have? Kind of a fascinating question, right? I deal with a lot of people in D.C. I've never met one of them where I think, wow, this is an incompetent buffoon who hates America. Never. And yet, things grind forward that make no sense whatsoever. In a similar way, you look at Persia. I got to know the diaspora very well living in New York, but incredibly talented cultural people, traders, smart, educated, and they've been saddled with the yoke of these lunatics for decades already. And there were moments of, I've just about had it. I mean, when Obama came into power and there's uprising, and who knows, maybe if he had actually given some words of encouragement, maybe that would have been the end of the regime. But instead, he made some comment about we're not interfering in other people's politics, and the religious police went back to beating pretty girls to death for showing an inch of hair. So it's very hard to judge what individuals will do under a totalitarian government where if you speak out, they'll come torture your children. But I think we're seeing it now. They rose up. 35,000 people were killed by the mullahs in the last month alone, with notably all of the Western liberals who've been screaming about genocide in Gaza being noticeably silent. Apparently, their sign printers didn't work anymore, and they couldn't go march. So I'm very hopeful. I think it's they managed to on the way out. And I think they are on the way out. They're going to cause damage, and there's going to be suffering. Any remaining residual sympathy they had in the region is gone. They fired rockets at everybody.
Yeah.
Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Saudi, like they're hitting just population centers everywhere. That is not the act of someone who wants to stay in power and have friends.
No, I mean, he pretty much isolated all the neighbors in the entire area. I mean, the fact that now pretty much anybody that had any sympathy towards Iran is like, hey, you just lobbed missiles at us and what have you, and you struck my infrastructure, not just the targeting the U.S. base there, but hitting airport infrastructure, you name it. You pretty much burned all that goodwill. And frankly, Israel has done a pretty good job of approaching those other countries. I mean, between Saudi Arabia, Qatar, everything else like that. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that Israel made a mistake when they struck that, the one talks that they had there, and had to apologize for, I can't even remember what the peace talks were about, but it's like,
Right.
yeah, I understand why you did it, maybe a little restraint on that one would have been smarter. Who knows? But I mean, right now, Israel is not being, lambasted like they usually do anytime there's a Middle Eastern conflict, which is kind of impressive.
Just give the New York Times a little time; they'll get there.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come around. I mean,
they're busy trying to catch up because they're very annoyed. Yeah. There was actually a great snippet I just saw. One of the people I kind of do a lot of writing with on Substack posted it. It was a camera take of an American reporter. I can't remember if it was CBS, NBC. I can't remember. In London, covering the Iranians in London, cheering on, saying, "God bless Israel, God bless America." Death to the Ayatollah. And as they're chanting that, the American reporter, is reading his phone. He's clearly been sent a message by his publishers or his showrunners at the network, who's like, "What is this? Oh, they're telling me not to cover this. They're telling me not to show basically the Iranians actually in favor." No, fuck that. That's what I'm covering. Fantastic. Yeah. And he's going to lose his job, but he's going to find another one somewhere better. Good for him. So
I mean, look, that's one thing, and we could go down the whole press conversation too of like major corporations basically owning their own PR firm, whether it's BBC, CNN, Fox, whoever. I mean, that's the days of Dan Rather and let me just report the news are well behind us, unfortunately. But or they're very hard.
I would say the days of Dan Rather just reporting the news never happened, but that's a discussion for another topic.
Fair, that's fair. I mean,
he was reading that through the prism of Marx, but aside from that,
I will not argue that it was a rose-colored glasses on that, but I would say it also has not. It was not the it seems now that it's between the lawsuits that get thrown around there against BBC, CBS, and everything else like that and some of them are justified and others are like it's like it's Dr. Evil, I'm suing you for $1 billion kind of thing. But
exactly, I'll settle for 20 grand, but whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like Elon Musk buying Twitter and or what, X now or whatever. It's like, okay, the major news networks are already bought up and what have you, but Twitter's available. Let me buy that. A lot of people in this generation get their news through Twitter and tweets and, whatever the proper terminology is. And it's like, let me control that news source. I mean, listen, this isn't a recent, change in the way things work. I mean, we could go all the way back to the United Fruit Company and everything else like that, and the Banana Wars. But
you gave us the term Banana Republic. I love telling
that's
people
right.
That.
That's right.
We went to war.
I mean, this
bananas.
isn't like we have struck new ground. It's just repackaged stuff and what have you. So
was it Senator Seward who sent the U.S. Navy to Asia because the Chinese impounded one of his shipments of opium that he was shipping into Beijing? It was a pretty prominent case where we sent the whole fucking Navy steaming
Yeah.
into Hong Kong Harbor.
I mean, look at Smedley Butler and his speaking out about the whole, hey, we're just being sent down to South America to fight the wars to keep the cost of bananas down and all that
That's
for the
right.
American population.
Yeah.
But
Price of bananas.
Yep, that's
That
right.
hurts. Well, I got a
Yep.
question. Yeah, because I'm curious about your perspective to the degree you can discuss it, having served, as a colonel, having done a lot of probably policy work or similar in different commands. Do you have a consistent perception of how the U.S. media treated things that you actually knew about were happening? Like, or was it sort of? I'm kind of curious in general. That's my
Yeah.
open question.
No, that's a good question. First off, I would say that and this is definitely into the days of Afghanistan, is that the Taliban were well inside our OODA loop of, being inside our curve as far as news, because the United States has a policy of the truth will set you free kind of thing. And it is never adopted to the 24-hour news cycle. And
Right.
so, the thing that we would run into in Afghanistan is that, we would do a raid on a compound, kill, capture whoever it is that we were after, and then get out of there. And then the Taliban would make a claim saying that, oh, they killed women and children. Women and children are dead, whether we killed them or whether the Taliban did them for basically a photo op is definitely up for a conversation. And in the U.S.'s policy was like, well, we want to be beyond reproach. And so we want the world that if what we say is truthful, therefore they will believe us right off the bat. Well, that never happens.
No.
And 2-3 weeks later, when we're vindicated saying, no, we didn't, kill women and children and what have you, the news cycle's moved on. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers.
That's buried on page 19, where the headline before was,
if it even makes page 19. But we have never gotten to the point of getting in, and it's not like political spin and what have you, but I mean, lack of better words, is that the way that politicians, spin masters deal with, during elections and everything else like that, dealing with, rumors and innuendos and everything else like that. The U.S. military public affairs is well behind the times. And so you would get lambasted by whoever, whether it's Al Jazeera, whether it's CNN, BBC, saying, the U.S. is doing war crimes. And by 3 weeks later, after we have shut down operations, because we got to do a whole full-on investigation, meanwhile, the Taliban has refit, recover, and moved on to the next objective and what have you. We're frozen. And by the time we're vindicated and allowed back to going to do operations again, like, the targets have moved. The any momentum that we had from that previous hit is lost. And I saw that time after time on in the various deployments that we went on. But as far as your question of, do you think that the military or the media has been fair to military operations and what have you? I would say yes. Usually, especially in the early days of the wars and all that stuff, the military and all the operations I was dealing with, the military was treated quite well.
Oh, that's a delightful answer. I'm kind of surprised, but
yeah,
no, that makes sense. I do recall I was in Australia at the time. Still angry because I walked away from the towers on September 11th. So I mean, it was, as I said, that was the fourth time Islamic terrorists tried to blow me up in 5 years, and I came home that day and said to my wife, "This is starting to feel personal." But I remember we were in Australia when the story broke about the abuses at Abu Ghraib and the prison, and so I was with, I would hope would be fairly representatively intelligent professional Australians. And all they knew was the outrage. I said, it is outrageous, but do you know where those photos came from? Right? Like, do you think that's an intrepid photographer who snuck into the military prison and took pictures? Like, where did they get the pictures? And they all looked at me.
If I was a betting person, and I've never actually done the forensics on that, which would be an interesting guess. My guess is that somebody, again, like this is the thing about, when you have 22-year-old, ASVAB waivers that are like, let's face it, I mean, most people don't join the army to become prison guards.
Right.
There's plenty, so probably not your first choice. So
Right.
anyways, you have some knucklehead in there who's now like, hey, I'm doing this stuff I shouldn't be doing because I can do it. It's
Yep.
like the whole Stanford,
Oh,
psychology test
right.
kind of stuff. And it's like, and they're getting their buddies to snap pictures, and now they're sending them to their friends back home and everything else like that. And that now leaks out because that person sends it to somebody, and the chain of custody is lost, and now that's all been pushed out. I mean, that'd be my guess. And so, I mean, let me
It's
give
not
you
a bad guess, but actually, it's
yeah,
even better in terms of what I'm talking about in terms of how the media deals with things. They took those pictures and shared them without the
yep,
detail that they were leaked by that clown Chelsea Manning or whatever it's calling
yep,
itself now, right? So they were evidence in the court-martial proceedings of the soldiers who were already being tried by the military for this. So that my point was that was left out of the outrage. But the point was, yes, this happened. That's
yeah.
outrageous. But the American military was already disciplining them for criminal actions. Somehow, magically, that never got reported as part of the story. It was just the outrage
Well,
itself.
I'll be honest with you. I didn't know that, at all. So, I mean,
Isn't that
so I
amazing?
just got educated right there. I mean, again, that doesn't shock me when stuff gets taken out of context. And,
Yeah.
again, when I was in Afghanistan, I'll use the example of when we were accused of burning Qurans
Right.
there in the prison there, because, inmates were, sharing codes and all that right in the Quran. And I mean, I can see exactly how that went down.
Yep.
There's an E4 that is in charge of this, and this, the sergeant first class says, hey, they're passing, notes back and forth in Qurans. Get rid of that shit. And they're like, what does an E4 do? It's like, well, I know I can burn. These things burn. Let me
I
burn
got a
them.
burn pit out back.
Yeah. What else would I do with these things? Like,
He
you
told me to
know,
get rid of it.
yeah, you told me to get rid of it. You didn't tell me how to get rid of it. And, that's what it did. But I mean, did we get smeared on that? Absolutely. Did we
Absolutely.
deserve it? No.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I'm actually pleased to hear you say that in your experience, it was fairly treated. I always go back to LBJ's great statement when someone tried to get him whipped up about complaining about the press, which he just refused to do. And he said, look, if I held a press conference tomorrow in front of a lake and with the cameras rolling and all the major national media there and every journalist in the country, and I looked at them and I stood up and I walked across the water to the other side of the lake, the headline tomorrow would read, President can't swim.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no question about it. And, and let's face it too, there's plenty of reporters that have a bee in their bonnet on whatever their key thing is. And,
Yep.
and I remember watching my boss visiting in Australia being buttonholed by like some reporter about, when he was Northcom commander and like, hey, would you have launched nuclear weapons? And, it basically is trying to get him to, waffle on that. And I remember
Right.
my boss looking him square in the eyes and says, if I was ordered to launch the nuclear weapons, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I don't think
That's
he was expecting that answer.
right. Yeah. Well, that's always good. At least we can surprise them. So, what would be, if we put down a bet for 365 days from now, what would be your assessment of what's happening in Iran a year from now, its relation to its neighbors? What do you think? Spitballing.
As much as I would love to see regime change in Iran, I just don't see it happening. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, until, like, I just feel like, the Iranian regime has basically promoted people who agree with them and put people in charge or that are going to maintain that, direction, everything else like that. I believe that, you know, but I just don't think that they're going to have the assets to, cause the mischief that they've been doing for the last 3 or 4 decades and what have you. Um, what I could see potentially happening is that Iraq, who has no love lost for Iran, sees this as an opportunity to, if we knock out a lot of their military forces, I could see a Middle Eastern invasion of Iran and a peacekeeping force put in by the Middle East, potentially, if we knock out their assets. But I don't, as much as I would love to see the Iranian people stand up, like, I don't think that, I think it's kind of like Iraq when we went in there. It's like, oh, we're going to get rid of Saddam Hussein and then everybody's going to love us.
Right.
So they loved us for about a month or two, and then they really didn't like us.
Stop loving us.
Because, I mean, who's going to take charge? I mean, when you hit at that level, as much as I would like to have a pro-U.S., a pro, like, how are we going to be able to kill all the ones that are going to continue the current path? Like, I can drop a 500-pounder on that guy, but, I got to drop a lot of 500-pounders to get all the ones that believe Khomeini was a martyr and, we should continue the fight. But I do believe that Iran will be on the back foot now for about, the next 10 to 20 years. And we'll have a hard time causing the level of mischief and issues and undermining governments and everything else like that. But I don't know. I just don't see them necessarily coming to the peace table. And I'd be honest with you, like, the U.S. Reasoning is fairly muddled. It's been, we can't let them have nuclear weapons, which I don't disagree with and what have you. Of course, we're supposed to have taken care of that back in June. But, let's just say that they've accelerated their program, or they're able to smuggle some stuff out so they still had capability. Like, I mean, things change, intelligence, new things get learned, etc. But I also think that, well, I'm going to kill Khomeini. All right, that doesn't hurt my head either. I mean, when he
brings
killed,
joy to my heart.
Yeah, like, it's like, oh, that's a shame. Give me a cup of coffee.
Exactly.
But like, when he killed, what was it, Salvamini or whatever it was, back in his first term, like the Quad Force.
Oh, that was fantastic.
That was a
General
beautiful
Suleiman.
thing. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
That was fantastic.
I mean, did that guy need killing? Absolutely.
Was it long overdue?
Absolutely. Am I glad he did it? Absolutely. Because, I mean, what was he doing in Iraq? I'm sure there was nothing nefarious going on there.
All they've done, it's odd. They squandered the massive kind of economic potential of their people and their culture.
No doubt.
On this obsession with destroying Israel and fighting the great Satan, us.
Yep.
And it's beyond awful, but also just kind of fascinating. Like, they managed to keep the people rallied around that bullshit for decades. First off,
no doubt,
Israel's going nowhere. And if Israel ever got close to annihilation, they would have taken the whole fucking region out in a nuclear holocaust, which they weren't going to do.
Yeah,
right. So,
they
like,
have nuclear weapons.
What's that? Oh, I guess
Israel does have nuclear weapons.
They do.
So,
that'd be my guess. That'd be my guess.
Yeah.
That'd be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's ever been acknowledged, but I mean, I think pretty much everybody's like, oh yeah, Israel has nuke.
Oh yeah. So the entire program was somewhat fruitless, and it wasn't like again, it's fascinating to me looking at how kind of totalitarian despots make decisions and what drives them, because it's not the things that drive us, right? Comrade Xi came into power in China, riding a wave of 10% annual growth, whether you believe that number or you believe it's closer to 6 or 7, whatever. Massively exploding economy, culturally loosening up, getting back to the post-Mao era where Beijing was as free as Paris or New York, right? That, kind of a golden age. And instead of just coming to power, putting his feet up and riding the wave, having the world call him a genius for being the last premier that made China the greatest thing ever, he decided to become an insane restrictionist lunatic who made everyone smile into their cell phone camera and give them a social credit score. Like, why?
Yeah.
It's going to make no sense to me. Why? Putin, 40 times a billionaire. Palaces of 300,000 square feet that he probably has never seen before. In his waning years with cancer, invades Ukraine.
Yeah.
Why? Who can give a shit? It's just, and so similarly, the Iranians spent all of their time obsessing about Jews, who are fascinating, let's be clear, but spending all this time wanting to destroy this country and doing it around the world, like and providing missiles to Hezbollah and all this crap, and you have basically the short point is a rabbi told me once, like, sometimes you just have to believe what people say. They fully believed that this would be the millennial, 12er Shia belief that the Mahdi will come if the conditions are right, and that really animated their entire worldview, much like the mayor of New York currently, which is odd enough. Because it doesn't make sense in any other practical way, right? You could have been trading with your prosperous neighbors. You'd all be living well. You'd have tourist junkets where you could gouge Israelis for $30 a martini in Tehran. Why not do that? And they didn't.
Yeah, well, that's the argument of like a rising tide lifts all ships, and it's like, yeah, this makes no sense. You could sell your oil, you could turn this into a great place, but no, you got to go after the boogeyman, and and again,
I'd pay a fortune to go see the architecture of Isfahan and Qum.
Yeah,
love to.
And it's like, why go through that level of? I mean, Iran and I'd say Russia are two different, like on that parallel, like. Iran, their logic there is makes no sense aside from they want to be the puppet masters in the entire region, and until I'd say recently probably had pretty good lines in there. They had their hooks into Iran pretty deep. They had Syria. Saudi was the one that they were concerned with, and the Saudis were concerned with them. I also think that this potentially shut down a nuclear arms race in the Middle East because, if Iran starts they're going to have nukes here in 5 years, guess what? Saudi Arabia and the rest of those countries are going to have to follow suit.
And that's where I applaud Trump for this. I had, just by total chance, I had the opportunity to have dinner back in 2019. It was a benefit for a nuclear proliferation, not for profit. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But my host, wildly inflated my importance and invited me to this dinner, which had a bunch of the Secretary of Energy and a few of the deputies under the Obama administration who negotiated the disastrous Iran deal.
Mm-hmm.
And again, speaking to them again had me thinking of Milton Friedman, right? Because, at least in my opinion, having done a lot of negotiations in the private sector, you can never let yourself get swayed and anchored by where the conversation's going. You have to go into a negotiation knowing what you want.
Yep.
And if it starts to chip away from what you want, the temptation is strong in human nature to get along, such that you will often drift towards that new anchoring point. And that's an error. You should never do that. And I was listening to them, and it became clear that, in my impression, that's what had happened to them during these negotiations, right? They started out with, we want to restrict their ability to get a nuke. Great, right? But the Iranians don't have a 4-year election cycle to deal with, right? So they don't give a shit. They can wait 5 years to get a result they want, whereas you're on the clock and you want results for your boss. Ideally, he'd like results quickly, please, because I've got a re-election campaign coming up. So there's this, they acknowledge this whole set of factors that weigh on the American side. And what I found fascinating speaking to this team, smart people, driven, patriots, politically different, but not stupid people. And they let themselves, in my mind, talk themselves into believing that they got the best deal possible. But the best deal possible isn't always worth getting, right? So what they got was a bunch of liars who have proven to be liars forever, who promised them the moon
Yep.
and had no intention of ever delivering it, and had
Yeah.
no intention of letting us ever have adequate supervisory capabilities, didn't tie it to things like releasing American Iranian joint citizens held at Irvin prison. Like there were a whole host of things. And I brought that up. I asked them, I was like, I'm curious. Like there were lots of things you could have tied to this. And their answer was, we didn't want to get distracted by other things. Fair, kind of fair enough. But my impression was they got played. I thought that before I ever met these people, that they got played.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I mean, I know when we were doing operations in Iraq Iraq, it was like, hey, stop undermining the deal that we're trying to push through in those days and what have you. So, yeah, I mean, I would say that the negotiation team for the Obama piece had rose-colored glasses on there. And I mean, I'm not necessarily a Trump fan by any stretch of imagination, but I mean, I will say that he definitely he resets deterrence.
Yes.
And, it's no longer like, I will write you a very angry letter,
Right.
and signed by the UN. It's like, no, I'm going to, put warheads on foreheads and what have you. And, and I think he cultivates his image of like, I'm a loose cannon and what have you. And because it works for him.
Yes.
The one piece, in switching gears slightly, and you brought it up as far as the whole Ukraine invasion by Putin, that's the one that I have a hard time understanding the administration's take on that. Because, I mean, from a Machiavellian point of view, this is a beautiful thing. I mean, we should be absolutely propagating that war in Ukraine because we're depleting a peer antagonist, I would call it, of Russia. We're doing it for pennies on the dollar compared to U.S. Level invasion. And there's no blood, spilled on the U.S. side of it.
Yep.
It's all Ukrainian. So from a Machiavellian point of view, this is as good as proxy wars get. So, Trump's hammering of Zelensky and all that in Ukraine is, getting the Republicans to parrot it is like always been a little bit like, well, why? Why aren't you,
turn it on. Who cares? Let's sell them more stuff.
Yeah, I mean, okay, we're giving you all these weapons and what have you, and whether it's kind of like the Lend-Lease deal that we had with England back in World War II.
Exactly.
So we may not ever see that money back, but I mean, hey, Raytheon pays taxes. They pay a lot of taxes, and if they're selling you, Raytheon missiles and what have you,
like our credit so far is better than the Ukrainian government's. But yeah, it's a bafflement. I remember having lunch with a former ambassador who retired, funny guy, English guy, like 2 weeks after the war broke out in London, and he says he's very funny. He said, "This may not be a very popular opinion, but Putin told him not to join NATO." Just hilarious. That was his viewpoint of, what do you expect? And I'm just fascinated it's gone on for so long. I've got a friend spends a lot of time. He's one of the contractors repairing the Ukrainian grid, which to me seems like rebuilding a wall while it's being bulldozed, right? like so for the huge amount of time in Kiev,
the ocean.
Yeah, exactly. He said it's somewhat surreal because 95% of the time in Kiev, you wouldn't know there's a war going on, right? Yeah. Just everything is the same. Every now and again, a siren goes off. You run down to a shelter. But yeah, I don't know. You've seen a lot more of it than certainly I have. I mean, is it just that kind of aggression and war is man's natural state, and that's just what we're always going to do?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that Russia was definitely threatened when Ukraine was talking about joining NATO, and NATO was like, well, maybe. And, and we, and what are we pulling Finland and, a couple of the other like satellite countries, like they like a buffer.
Yep.
They don't, it's kind of like North Korea with China. Like, does China really like North Korea? Not a whole lot, but they really want a buffer between them and South Korea.
Yep.
And they'll deal with the lunatics that are down there in North Korea to keep that. So we probably started treading on that a little bit. But I also think we were emboldened when he seized Crimea, and there was really, aside from an angry worded letter
just
from the UN saying,
right after the Olympics.
Shame on you.
The
Please
biggest
don't do
middle
that again.
finger in history. Hosted the Olympics and then went, oh, by the way, we came to visit. We loved it.
We decided not to leave. Not to leave.
But that's a bigger question. In that the logic, I guess that's the logic that's so foreign, right? By that logic, Canada should be worried about us invading every day. We're not going to, right? Mexico doesn't think we're going to invade them. So buffer against what, right?
Yeah.
They really believe that South Korea is like suddenly like, you know what? I'm going to march to Beijing, right? It's. I think that's the thing that especially I think Americans is a hard time grappling with. That Russia wants a buffer from what? The Germans used to have a military tradition, and after we spanked them in World War II, they become some of the biggest pacifists on the planet. Right. So buffer against what? They really think NATO's going to invade?
Well, I think the natural resources in Ukraine and plus all the industrial area and everything, and you're smarter on that aspect than I am, is, well, not only does it buffer, but what would be swell is getting our hands on all that economic, growth that we potentially are able to harness. I just don't think they were patient enough to, work a pro-Russian government. They were like, we should be able to grab this. I also think it's, in the same way that George Bush believed Cheney when he says, no, if we take Iraq, they're going to love us there.
We'll make a profit. Remember that? Remember that phrase.
So, it's like, we take Ukraine. Most of the folks there really want us back. It's like, okay, maybe that was, you're in the echo chamber on that one.
Right.
So I think that they believed that it was going to be a lot easier, that they were going to capitulate a lot sooner. And so this is a calculated risk. And I think the same, again, I think that's why China is really hesitant to take Taiwan. And as much as Xi wants Taiwan, he desperately wants Taiwan, but, it's like, well, but I think he's also realistic enough. Is like the Taiwanese are not going to be happy about this, and the U.S. is, kind of vague response of what our response would be if he decided to roll across the straits there. Is kind of I firmly believe if he believed he could do it, he would do it. Like if it cost him a million Chinese to do it,
I don't think he'd care.
No problem.
No. Yeah, true. But they're facing it's. I recall. I'm getting old enough now to remember. When I was in high school in New York, it was a given among the same sort of chattering classes we have today that the Japanese system, which restricted freedom, prized conformity, government central planning mixed with capitalism, was definitely superior. Right? They just bought Rockefeller Center for $1 billion. That was the peak. 8 months later, a group of American investors bought it back for $200 million. And they've never recovered, right? They've never, ever recovered their position of economic eminence. Similarly, the Chinese are in the same position.
The late 80s, 90s, where everybody was concerned that Japan was going to economically eclipse the United States and that we were on the ropes and what have you. And I think we sold at the high dollar mark and then bought it back for pennies on the dollar. So,
amen. Our chaotic system of freedom just wins. It may take a little while. And similarly, I remember I was like, your kids have to learn Japanese. They don't hear that now. Everyone's like, my kids are going to take Chinese. Mandarin. I laugh because good friend of mine I went to business school with in Australia from China, Beijing. His parents were academics, so they were sent off to the May 4th farm. So he was like 3 or 4 years old at that time under Mao. And they were punished for being intellectuals, right? So, but of course, commies always get shit wrong. And so when the famines came, because guess what? Professors don't know how to farm. Everyone on the farms at least ate and survived, where all of the peasants who'd been given the apartments in the city all died. Right? So millions of people. So much for collective planning. Right? But at least he survived that. So his hatred of communism is profound. Right? Yeah. But when it comes to, I'm teaching my kids Chinese, they take lessons 2 times a week. That's fine. That's lovely. That's great. Terrific. Yep. Good for you. But his comment as a native to Beijing, native, actually Mandarin speaker, his son spent 4 years in grammar school and middle school in Australia in English. When they moved back to China, his 12-year-old, 13-year-old son was instantly put into the English schools because he would never be accepted as a native. He would never speak Chinese Mandarin fluently as if he would if he had stayed there. So it was just pointless. He might as well be an expatriate. Culturally, that matters so enormously because if someone who grew up speaking Mandarin and spent 4 years in an English-speaking school cannot be accepted as a native speaker, why bother? I mean, again, if you want to do it because you want to learn a language, wonderful. But if you're doing it on the conceit that somehow you are going to fit in and work seamlessly in China in business, dream on. You might as well think it's something working out.
Yeah, I was in the room when Secretary Clinton and Geithner were both doing the economic dialogues talks there in China. Again, I was carrying the Admiral's bags. And it was interesting, again, it's almost like Eisenhower and, beware of the military industrial complex. Like it was a complete disconnect from the economic side of China versus the military side of China. And you could almost when the military general stood up and started railing against the United States, I can't remember what he was railing against us about. But it was something, and he definitely was. He was not a fan of the United States. I'll just go that far.
No way.
Yeah, I mean, shocking. It is you just watched all the the Chinese delegate their Treasury Secretary counterpart and Secretary of State counterpart and all that are just kind of oh man, it's the crazy Uncle Earl going off on the Thanksgiving table.
Right. Just let him go. Let him wear out.
Yeah. It's dude, you're really jacking this up, for no good reason. So I think there's a disconnect a little bit between the military and what they want and what and again, that was a little bit either, man, I'm a little rusty in whether Chi I think he was in charge then, but if not, it was just before he took power. And, but anyways, watching that kind of unfold is there's a seam here, that we could probably exploit between the economic side and the military side of China. But, anyways, that was I'd also say that the U.S., and again, you're smarter on this than I am, is way of negotiating in Asia is profoundly out of step with reality. I mean, China has
That's well put.
I poke you in the chest, you take a step back, I take a step forward. Right. And that's whereas the Western way of negotiating is I give a little, you give a little, and we compromise somewhere in there on acceptable to both parties, and both parties win. And I think a lot of times that when we try to deal with China and what have you, a lot of the negotiators, the people in the State Department, et cetera, have that Western way of thinking when they try to negotiate with China.
Probably. Yeah. And they're missing the point entirely.
Totally.
And plus the fact that Americans are by nature, I think, fairly optimistic, meaning we want to get a deal done and we think the other side does too.
Right.
But the other side wants to get what they want. They don't give a shit about a deal.
That's right.
it's one of the one of the best things I ever learned over the course of a career has been, especially cross culturally. Walk away if you haven't drawn a line in the sand in your head as to what you're willing to accept. When you get there and you find out they won't move, walk away. It may come back. I mean, I've had deals come back 2 years later, but like in the moment, the American desire to, and even vis-a-vis Europe, to get the deal done, they use that, right? Well, if we just do this, you're like, well, no, I'm not doing that. But thanks. You know, what do you do? I remember someone asked me once, you know, in relation to kind of we've been working on this thing a long time. Anyway, the context was, guy actually said to me, well, you know, what else are you going to do if you don't get this done? I said, I'm going to go fly fishing.
Yeah.
Like, you don't seem to understand that an option for me is nothing. And that's probably just fine. I'm going to learn how to cook Wagyu better.
Yeah, whatever it is, like you can't just like, I got to get a deal no matter what.
Get it.
I mean, this is why, you know, Vietnam has done so well, because they absolutely understand the Asian way of negotiating. And, you know, so China pokes them in the chest, they poke right back. I mean, how many times has Vietnam and China gone to war? At the last count.
Which is hilarious. Right.
Yeah.
And which is all performative, because aside from the sadness of the soldiers on the ground getting killed, the governments don't give a shit.
Yeah.
At all.
It's like, I'm not going to give in, and I'm willing to put my military into, you know, to let you know that.
Here's a question for you, especially for sort of younger folks who listen. And oddly, I've got a following in the colleges, which I find beyond hilarious. It causes my children no grief. No end of grief. I remember when I graduated from university, I spoke to military recruiters, and it was in '93, and all of them, it was Navy and Marines. I never spoke to the Air Force because my eyesight sucked, and all I thought was, I can't fly, so why bother? And I didn't want to be, you know, an occupation force, so I didn't speak to the Army. But they both the recruiters looked at me like, it's over, we won. Like, the Berlin has fallen, the evil empire is gone. Freedom is blossoming throughout Eastern Europe. Like, it's over. There's no career here anymore. I don't know. You know, they like my scores. They like, you know, language skills. They're like, but, you know, I guess we can go through the paperwork, but like, do you really want to do this? It was fascinating.
Yeah.
I think how different a life could be 5 years sooner or later, because of course history didn't end.
Oh yeah.
Like, what would you say to someone now who's thinking, you know, thinking of a career in the military? Like, what was the, just in general, what would you say to someone who's like, I'm 20, I'm gung ho?
Yeah. I mean, let's face it. Like, there's no short. I mean, I remember those days and all that. I mean, the Air Force had this huge swagger on. Like, we don't even need the Army anymore, because I mean, this was after the first Gulf War, and you know, I was like, you know, Army's irrelevant, and it's all Air Force and what have you, which obviously is pretty, you know, naive opinion. But you know, I would also say it depends what you want to get out of the military. Like, if you want to make a career like I did, like, there's plenty of opportunities for that. Like, nothing's going away. You know, there's always going to be another conflict. There's always going to be, you know, another war. And I would also, you know, again, talking on Eisenhower and the military industrial complex, like, I would also be a little skeptical on, like, when I was getting ready to retire, it was all about, you know, the Russian bear and, you know, the Chinese dragon. Like, it was the two great powers, you know, ready to go toe to toe with the United States. And, you know, we need to build the military to fight these, you know, folks. And it's like, because I mean, Afghanistan was winding down. I mean, we still had troops there, but it was coming to an end. Iraq was pretty much coming to an end. We had some folks running around Syria doing stuff, but there was limited. Like, the heydays of GWAT were well behind us. You know, there's no question about it. So it's like, it seemed like, you know, the Air Force was coming back to, you know, we need more F-22s and more F-35s and all that stuff, because it's all about going against Russia and China. And then Russia invades Ukraine. Turns out that the Russian bear is really a paper tiger. And it's like, now it's shifted completely. all about China. So,
Right. Who
there's
themselves are probably
always
not
going to,
that dangerous because of demographic implosion and internal restlessness. They've got riots in major cities every week that
yeah.
the press is not allowed to cover.
There's no question in like China that the level of enthusiasm for the Chinese dream, whatever that is definitely waning.
Yeah.
The lie flats, campaign that this youth is going to have a whole bunch of, unemployable, highly educated Chinamen that are looking for like, hey, I need a job and I can't find one. So
Yeah.
China has a lot of problems.
Huge.
But to your question of like, what would you say is like, hey, look, if you want to go do, the military stuff and, whatever that happens to be, Army, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, whatever force you want to call, like there is always going to be conflict. Like it's never
Yeah.
going away.
Never going away.
There's always going to be, I want to do this. No, you can't do this. Well, I'm going to go get my baseball bat and I'm going to go do this. And, and there are always jobs there.
Right.
And it always kind of ebbs and flows based on the economy and what happens too is like, you can always see it in the promotion rates and all that in the military when it's 80% promotion rate to the next rank or higher, it's like, the economy is, doing poorly because everybody's staying in. When the
Staying
promotion,
fresh.
so it's like, they're like, or excuse me, no, the economy's doing, great because, all these people are getting out and getting jobs. So
Right.
like, we got to promote whoever.
I've got 8 months left to go. I'm sending my resume out.
Yeah.
Right.
Like as soon as I got eligible to leave, I'm leaving. And like, so the promotion rates of the people that stay behind, you could say that was me.
Right.
Like it works out pretty well. Or if there's a major war where they start plussing up the force and what have you. On the flip side, when the economy is doing, poorly or does really well, as I said, it's that ebb and flow, and I'm getting my, I apologize. I'm getting my like, okay, economy's good, people leave. Economy bad, people stay. Like, let me just make it very simple like that.
And more sign up, presumably, right? If you're really looking for something to do, especially early in your career, and you've sent out 1,000 resumes and gone on 7 interviews and nothing's happening, you're like, that recruiter keeps calling me.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes down to like how anxious is the recruiter? Are you chasing him or is he chasing you? It kind of gives you a sign of the times. I mean, right now, I doubt that the recruiting office is really busy this week. Everybody's like, let's set this one out for a little bit and see what's happening. I don't necessarily want to sign up for World War III.
Well, it's funny. My experience, and it's curious, purely, having over decades done a lot of kind of public-private sector work, security work, and both from military sales, but also just dealing with the military a lot. My impression is those have become generally 2 kinds of people who join up, just that I perceive. One is a potentially interesting career path. Maybe they're going to pay for college, maybe all the rest of it. And I understand that part of this is I may be in combat. But again, the percentage of the actual military that actually goes into combat is not 100%. So I'm playing the odds. And I if that comes up, I guess it'll come up, but I hope it doesn't. And then there are the gung-ho adrenaline junkies who are like, that's it. Like, that's why they're here. And I'm kind of curious, A, if you agree with that estimation, and if you do, like, what's the percent of each in your experience?
Yeah, I think you absolutely. I agree with your, analogy or whatever that you put down there of like, hey, I wanted the adrenaline junkies. I'm going to get after this. This is what I want to do. Everything else like that. The other is like, hey, this is the pathway for me to, bigger, better things, pay for college, get an education, learn a skill, whatever it is. And some stay, some leave. I'd say the adrenaline junkies, those guys are coming no matter what's going on. It's like, the SEALs are not lacking for recruits. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
The number of SEAL, positions that are available is a different conversation, which is actually quite fascinating. If you ever look on the SEAL recruiting, and I'm just going to throw out numbers here that there's no factual base, so just to be clear. So let's say that you need 10 SEALs, like to maintain the SEAL force and everything else like that.
Yep.
They recruit 100 people to start buzz,
Right.
knowing full well they only need 10.
Right.
So that means they need to get rid of 90.
Yep.
And guess what? When they wash those guys out, they go to the needs of the Navy. And so this guy who is an adrenaline junkie who wanted to be a
He's
Navy
now a supply
SEAL
clerk.
he's needle gunning the deck of some destroyer in some miserable location.
Yep.
And honestly, it's like it's kind of brilliant because I mean the SEALs don't really have to hard recruit because they get plenty of people and they just whittle it down to whatever the number happens to be. And
Right.
I got people to do all those crappy jobs that nobody signs up for.
Right, because you signed the paperwork and they didn't guarantee you
own
were
you.
going to be a SEAL. Oh, that's rough.
It's quite brilliant.
You think that's true across the board, like Green Berets, combat control? Is that the same thing, or are they? Are they having their moment in the sun? Because you look back at Hollywood, especially, right?
Yeah.
For John Wayne on until the 80s, if you needed a badass in a film, he was a Green Beret, right?
Yep.
And then starting around Steven Seagal, they decided maybe the Navy wrote a check. They all became SEALs. I'm going to be fascinated to see after the movie upcoming about Mark Chapman, when that comes out, if Hollywood's going to shift and decide that the next set of badasses should be combat controllers. I wonder if that's going to follow the same trajectory of change.
Yeah, I don't know. That's one, I fully agree with you. Because I mean, from the John Wayne to, I mean, let's face it. You had the John Wayne, Green Beret movie, the Navy recruiting on Top Gun, the number of people that showed up at the Navy recruiter office, like, I want to be Top Gun. Absolutely. You sign here.
Sign right here. We promise that you'll have a chance.
Yeah.
Are you going to check my vision? No. We'll get to that. That's later. That's tomorrow.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about that. Don't
worry about that. You're headed for Top Gun for sure.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Officer and gentlemen, all the girls in the factory are that hot. Absolutely. Right. Deborah Winger's coming your way.
Yeah. Clint Eastwood, Marines. I mean, it's like, it goes. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the Navy is definitely, the SEALs are having their day in the sun and what have you. And, will ours be coming, with the new movie coming out? I hope so. But,
hope so.
I mean, I'd say we have a harder time recruiting just because nobody's hell, half the people in the Air Force don't even know what a combat controller is. Why would anybody on the civilian side know?
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And I didn't know until I was, I worked with many years ago, then asked me to join the board. It's phenomenal. We'll close up soon. I'll let you get back to your life, but give your last spork for the combat control. What is it that they do that's so different than what the normal airman does?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, the people ask me, so what'd you do in the Air Force? And I'd always quickly encapsulate it as all the fun things you wanted to do as a kid and your parents wouldn't let you. So
with explosives.
And it's scuba dive, parachute, blow things up, ride motorcycles, all that fun stuff. But as far as okay, sounds great. I'm in. What exactly do you do? It's in the three main missions that we would do as combat control was airfield seizure, jump in, take over a foreign airfield, open up a port basically to bring in follow-on forces and so forth. And you can see where we've done that in Panama back in the day. We did this a lot in Iraq and Afghanistan in the early days. And then we'd also set up, airfields and to support strikes going on later, with assault forces and so forth. Take over an airfield that we used to own or run, and then run in an assault force and then launch and go strike a target. So airfield operations, which also actually works really well for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief as well. Skills transfer.
Right. There's the soft side.
Yeah. That's a good PR. Then we had the, rescuing isolated Americans, so downed pilots, things like that. And so we would specialize on the permissive and non-permissive, or semi-permissive and non-permissive environments. So, deep insertion, go grab somebody.
That's a fantastic phrase. That's a great permissive and semi-permissive environments. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And then the third thing was, close air support. And people are like, well, aren't there other people who do close air support? And I was like, absolutely. There's plenty of people that do close air support. But to train to the level that you needed for complicated hits takes a level of precision and money and training and time to do it. And that's something that we specialized in. So anybody can call close air support. You can call close air support. I can call close air support. But if you were going as a JTAC, that means that you had the skills to do it. You knew where friendly forces were, and you had a special call sign that talking to a pilot with bombs in the plane that you really wanted on the ground in specific locations, it gave him a degree of confidence that you actually knew what you were doing. I never met this person before, everything else like that. And so, when you do a complicated hit to kill, capture, shadow governor of whatever province in Afghanistan, you would have aircraft stacked at 30,000 feet. So you could have AC-130s in there, fast-moving F-16s, F-18s, helicopters coming in and out, whether rotary wing, close air support, or medevac, potentially mortars, artillery. And then you also had ISR aircraft all in that stack. And so you're separating all that and also keeping track of where all the friendly forces are to avoid fratricide. So, the number of times that combat controllers saved the day with various soft teams that they were assigned to is a lot. Like guys calling in danger close with a 105 millimeter howitzer from an AC-130 7 meters away. Like, let me tell you, when that hits, you're going to feel it.
Yeah. That concussive force spreads well beyond the kill zone.
Yeah. So those are the three main missions that we as combat controllers really specialized in. And depending on who you're working with, you needed to have the same skills as whatever team, whether it was an Air Force team, whether it was an Army Special Forces team, a Navy SEAL team, Marine Raiders, or even a coalition special operations team. Like it would be a food fight for trying to get one of our guys because of the skills that they provided.
Right. Well, you just given a great ad for all the smart adrenaline junkies out there in their late teens and early 20s. So, just know for sure that when you go to the Air Force recruitment office, you're guaranteed to get into that pipeline. There's no way you'll be pushing paper somewhere in a warehouse, I promise.
Yeah, they actually do a pretty good job of recruiting people because normally people don't show up in the Air Force's doorstep asking, hey, I want to be a combat controller or a pararescue man or whatever. And it's like, and they do. It's like, I think they actually still get extra points for those guys. So, so it's because, most of those people, like, again, watch the Navy SEAL movie or watch the Army, Green Beret movie. And it was like, oh, I'll go that direction. It's like, yeah, okay, have a good time.
I'll go do that. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Spence, thank you so much. Any final words for our audience, or will?
No, it was a great conversation. I know we bounced around a lot of different topics and all that, and we kind of moved around the world, but it was a fun conversation. I really appreciated your inputs on that and the insight too. So
thanks for coming on. You've added a lot to the knowledge of my audience, which was not large before. And I will end up with a spoik for your current activities, which is rescuing cats from trees in Asheville. And I'll put a link to your YouTube videos, which are phenomenal. Just one of the best things absolutely ever that you learned how to, get tree climbing gear and you take down cats.
You have all these skills when you leave the Air Force and you're like, all right, I can go be a mercenary or I can rescue cats out of streets. It really comes down to that,
There's only two options. And I'm betting if one has a wife, one is leaning towards one of those options versus the other.
And that's why I'm rescuing cats out of trees. So, my wife and I have a deal that she's not allowed to work at the Humane Society. Otherwise, we'd have 20 cats and I'm not allowed to be a mercenary. So it all works out.
Perfectly fair. See, marriage is all about compromise. Well, thank you. And for all my listeners, remember to turn off the mainstream media who are lying to you and tune into Messy Times, the only objective source of accurate information left on the planet.
Good chatting with you, Chris.